I stared at my reflection in the polished surface of the lawyer's office door, the gold-embossed lettering of Jenkins Associates hovering like a halo around my tear-streaked face. My hands trembled as I clutched the manila envelope, its contents. Worth more than just paper and ink. A burst of laughter echoed from the parking lot, sharp, familiar, cutting. My parents, waiting in their luxury sedan, doubled over in mirth at the sight of their newly divorced daughter. "Look at her," my mother's voice carried on the autumn breeze, 32 and starting over with nothing. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Olivia Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and 20 minutes ago, I finalized my divorce from Daniel Mitchell, tech entrepreneur and my husband of 8 years. But what my parents didn't know, what no one knew, was that the envelope in my hands contained more than just divorce papers. It held my freedom, my future, and the sweetest form of justice I never knew I needed. I straightened my shoulders, adjusted the collar of my modest navy blazer, and walked toward them with measured steps. The clicking of my heels against the pavement counted down to the moment their laughter would die in their throats. "Oh, Olivia," my father, Charles Wesley, former bank executive and self-proclaimed financial genius, wiped at his eyes. "I told you marrying that boy would end this. Way. What are you going to do now? Move back home until you find yourself another meal ticket?" My mother, Victoria, perfectly coiffed as always, her diamonds catching the afternoon sun, smirked behind her designer sunglasses. "At least this time. Listen to us about the prenup." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I slid into the back seat of their car, placed the envelope carefully on my lap, and waited for them to join me. The leather seats squeaked under my father's weight as he settled behind the wheel. "Well," he prompted, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Has the reality set in yet? You gave up your career for that man, and now look at you." 8 years ago, I had been a promising software developer, fresh out of graduate school with job offers from 3 major tech companies. Then I met Daniel. At a startup conference, brilliant, charismatic, ambitious Daniel, who convinced me that together we could build something extraordinary. I believed him. I joined his fledgling company as Chief Technology Officer, poured my expertise and creativity into building the back-end systems that would eventually make StepLogic the industry giant it became. "Actually," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in months, "I'd like to stop by Cypress Coffee on the way home." My mother turned, arching a perfectly penciled eyebrow. "Coffee? Now? Shouldn't you be figuring out where you're going to live? Daniel gets to keep the house, doesn't he?" Of course that would be her first concern. Image. Status. The sprawling modern mansion in Highland Park that Daniel and I had purchased 3 years ago when StepLogic secured its first major round of funding. A house I had never wanted, with its cold marble floors and cavernous rooms designed more for impressing guests than creating a home. "I need to think," I said simply, "and I think better with coffee." My father sighed dramatically but pulled away from the lawyer's office and headed toward downtown. Cypress Coffee had been my sanctuary long before I met Daniel, back when I was coding 18 hours a day and surviving on caffeine and determination. The owner, Sophia, had watched me build my first prototype at the corner table by the window, offering encouragement and free refills during the lean times. As we drove, my parents continued their postmortem of my failed marriage. How they had warned me. How Daniel had always seemed too smooth, too perfect. How I should have listened to them about the prenuptial agreement. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had actually pushed for me not to sign one, convinced that Daniel's company would never amount to anything, that I was the one with the promising future. Another miscalculation in their long history of underestimating me. We pulled up outside Cypress Coffee, its warm wooden exterior and hand-painted sign a comforting sight amidst the sleek steel and glass of the revitalized downtown district. "We'll wait in the car," my mother said, her tone making it clear this was a concession rather than a courtesy. "Don't be long," my father added. "We need to talk about what happens next." I nodded absently, clutching the envelope to my chest. As I pushed open the heavy wooden door of the coffee shop, the familiar scent of freshly ground beans and baked goods wrapped around me like an old friend. Sophia glanced up from behind the counter, her experienced eyes taking in my formal attire and the envelope in my hands. Understanding dawned on her face. "The usual?" she asked softly. "Please," I whispered, making my way to my old corner table. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows, casting geometric patterns across the worn wooden tabletop. I traced them with my fingertip, remembering all the hours I'd spent here coding, dreaming, building. Before Daniel. Before I let someone else define my worth. Sophia set a large mug of black coffee with a splash of almond milk in front of me, along with a slice of lemon pound cake I hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said, sliding into the chair opposite me. "You look like you could use it." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I managed a small smile. "It's done. The divorce is final." She nodded, waiting for me to continue, creating space for whatever might come next. "My parents are outside," I said, nodding toward the window. "They're celebrating, in their own way." "Ah," Sophia replied, understanding immediately. She had met Charles and Victoria Wesley exactly once, when they had stopped by the coffee shop during one of their rare visits to see me before I was married. They had deemed the place quaint, the Wesley family code for beneath their standards. "They think I've lost everything," I continued, my fingers tracing the edge of the envelope. "That Daniel gets to keep it all, the house, the company, the life we built." Sophia's eyes narrowed slightly. "And did he?" I opened the envelope. Then, pulling out the document on top, not the divorce decree, but something far more valuable. I turned it toward Sophia, watching as her eyes widened. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A patent certificate," I confirmed. "For the algorithmic framework that powers StepLogic's entire platform. My name is the only one on it." 3 years into our marriage, when StepLogic was beginning to gain traction, I had insisted on filing the patent under my name alone. Daniel had been annoyed but distracted by investor meetings and media appearances. He had signed the paperwork without reading it carefully, assuming it was just another corporate formality. By the time he realized what I had done, we were too enmeshed, the company too dependent on my technical expertise for him to challenge it. "There's more," I said, pulling out a second document. "When we set up the company, I created a special class of shares. Technical founder shares. They're worth 3 votes to every one of Daniel's executive shares." Sophia's eyes grew even wider. "So you own 49% of the company outright," I finished for her. "But I control 57% of the voting rights." I had structured it this way intentionally, inspired by the lessons of female tech founders who had been pushed out of their own companies. Daniel had been so focused on being the face of StepLogic, the visionary CEO, that he had left the boring details to me. Another mistake. "The house is his," I admitted. "I don't want it. Never did." "But the company?" I smiled for the first time that day. "The company is mine." Sophia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You brilliant woman." "I wasn't always," I said, thinking back to the early days of our relationship. "I fell for his charm like everyone else. I believed we were partners." The cracks had appeared gradually. First, it was small things, Daniel taking credit for technical innovations during investor pitches, referring to my contributions as our team's work. Then came the more significant betrayals, hiring a new chief product officer without consulting me, changing strategic directions overnight based on conversations with his growing circle of tech bros and venture capitalists. The final straw had come 6 months ago. I had been working on a revolutionary privacy protocol, something that would set StepLogic apart in an industry increasingly scrutinized for data breaches and ethical concerns. I had shared my early research with Daniel, only to discover weeks later that he had filed a provisional patent under his name alone. When confronted, he had been dismissive. "It's all the same pot, Liv. The company is us, we are the company." But we weren't. Not anymore. "When did you know the marriage was over?" Sophia asked gently. I stared into my coffee, watching the light play across its surface. "When I realized I was just another asset to him. Something to be leveraged, exploited, and controlled. Like my relationship with my parents. Charles and Victoria Wesley had planned my life before I was born, the right schools, the right career, the right husband. When I had veered from their script by choosing computer science over law, they had been coldly disapproving. When I had fallen for Daniel, an entrepreneur from a middle-class background with no connections or family money, they had been openly hostile. Until StepLogic started making headlines. Until Daniel began appearing on the covers of business magazines. Until we bought the house in Highland Park and started moving in the social circles they had always aspired to join. Then, suddenly, Daniel was practically family, and I was so lucky to have found such an ambitious man. The irony was savage. They had finally approved of my choice, just as I was discovering what a mistake it had been. "What will you do now?" Sophia asked, pulling me back to the present. I took a deep breath, feeling something settle within me, not defeat, but resolve. "First, I'm going to finish this excellent coffee. Then I'm going to walk out to that car and tell my parents that I won't be needing their help or their opinions. And tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into the StepLogic offices as the controlling shareholder and make some long overdue changes." Sophia smiled, raising her own mug in a silent toast. To new beginnings. I clinked my mug against hers. To owning my power. Outside, I could see my parents growing impatient, my father checking his watch, my mother peering through the window with thinly veiled irritation. They were used to people accommodating their timetables, adapting to their needs. That ended today. I savored the last bite of pound cake, gathered my documents, and stood. Sophia gave me a quick hug. "Come back soon," she said. "That corner table will always be yours." "I will," I promised. "I have a feeling I'll be spending a lot of time here again. Planning my next chapter." As I stepped outside, the autumn breeze caught my hair, lifting it from my shoulders. I felt lighter somehow, unburdened. My father honked the horn once, short and sharp, a command to hurry. I walked to the car at my own pace, sliding into the back seat with deliberate calm. Finally, my mother sighed. "Now, we've been thinking. You can stay in the guest house until you get back on your feet. Your father knows someone at First National who might have an entry-level position in their IT department." I let her finish, watching her reflection in the rearview mirror as she outlined the diminished future she envisioned for me. When she paused for breath, I spoke. "That won't be necessary," I said quietly. "I won't be moving into the guest house." My father frowned, turning to look at me directly. "Don't be proud, Olivia. You need help. That's what family is for." "Family," I repeated, tasting the word. "Is family also for laughing at your daughter when she's going through a divorce? Is family for saying, 'I told you so,' instead of offering support?" My mother's lips thinned. "We're being realistic. Sometimes tough love is what's needed." "What I needed," I said, my voice gaining strength, "was parents who believed in me. Who saw my value beyond who I married or what social connections I could provide." "That's unfair," my father protested, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, not guilt, exactly, but recognition. "Is it?" I opened the envelope again, this time pulling out a bank statement. I handed it to my mother. "This is my personal account. Separate from the marital assets. I've been setting aside my bonuses and equity distributions for years." She glanced down, her eyes widening as she registered the 7-figure balance. "But how? Daniel agreed to this?" "Daniel didn't know," I said simply. "Just like he didn't know about these." I handed my father the patent certificate and shareholder agreement. He scanned them quickly, his years in banking giving him the ability to grasp their significance immediately. "You control StepLogic," he said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and, was it possible? Respect. "I do," I confirmed. "The house is his. The cars, the vacation property in Aspen, the art collection, he can have it all. But the company? The technology that makes it valuable? That's mine. It always was." My mother was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps she was. "Where will you live?" she asked, her voice smaller now. "I've already bought a loft downtown," I said. 2 blocks from Cypress Coffee. I signed the papers last week. I had found the space months ago, as my marriage crumbled around me. A former industrial building converted into spacious, light-filled residences. High ceilings, exposed brick, walls of windows overlooking the city. It wasn't impressive in the way my parents valued, no manicured lawns or formal dining rooms, but it was exactly what I wanted. A place to create, to think, to rebuild. "I don't understand," my father said slowly. "If you had all this planned, why did you ask us to pick you up today?" I met his gaze steadily. "Because I wanted you to see me. Really see me. Not as Daniel's wife or your disappointing daughter, but as who I am. What I've built. What I'm capable of." The silence that filled the car was heavy with unspoken truths, with years of misunderstandings and missed connections. My mother was the first to break it. You could have told us, she said, a defensive edge to her voice. Would you have believed me? I asked gently. Or would you have told me I was being naive, that Daniel would find a way to take it all? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I'd like you to take me to my new place now, I said. I can text you the address. My father nodded, starting the engine without further comment. As we drove through downtown, I gazed out at the city that had always been my true home, even when I was living in that sterile mansion in Highland Park. The skyscrapers gleamed in the afternoon sun, their windows reflecting possibilities, futures, choices. What will you do with the company? My father asked finally, his businessman's curiosity overriding his discomfort. Transform it, I said without hesitation. Step logic has strayed from its original mission. Daniel was too focused on growth at any cost, on pleasing investors rather than serving users. We've compromised on privacy, on ethics, on what matters. I had watched it happen gradually, voicing concerns that were increasingly dismissed. Daniel had surrounded himself with yes men and industry veterans who reinforced his worst instincts, that market domination mattered more than creating technology that actually improved lives. That sounds idealistic, my mother said, her tone suggesting it wasn't a compliment. It's practical, I countered. Users are becoming more sophisticated, more concerned about how their data is used. Regulators are catching up. The companies that will thrive in the next decade are the ones that build trust, not just market share. My father nodded slowly. I could see him processing, recalibrating his assessment of me. It wouldn't last, decades of seeing me as less than. Couldn't be erased in a single car ride, but it was a start. We pulled up outside my new building, its restored facade a harmonious blend of historic character and modern sensibility. A small moving truck was already parked outside, the few personal possessions I truly cared about being delivered from a storage unit where I'd been secretly sending them for months. This is it, my mother asked, unable to keep the judgment from her voice as she surveyed the surrounding neighborhood, still in transition, with a mixture of trendy cafes and older, less polished establishments. This is it, I confirmed, gathering my documents and purse. Thank you for the ride. I stepped out of the car, then leaned back in, meeting both their gazes one last time. I won't be coming to Sunday dinners for a while, I said. I need space. Time to rebuild on my terms, without commentary or criticism. My father looked like he wanted to object, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. Will you let us know how you're doing? She asked, and for the first time that day, I heard something genuine in her voice, concern, perhaps, or the first fragile tendril of respect. I will, I promised. When I'm ready. I closed the car door and walked toward my new home, feeling their eyes on my back but not turning around. The moving truck driver nodded in greeting, holding the building's front door open for me. Ms. Mitchell? He confirmed. Actually, I said, stepping into the soaring lobby with its original terrazzo floors and restored tin ceiling, it's Ms. Wesley now. Olivia Wesley. Reclaiming my name was the first step. Reclaiming my life would be the work of the coming months. As I rode the elevator to the 5th floor, I felt something unfamiliar unfurling in my chest, not happiness, exactly, not yet, but possibility. Potential. Power. My power. Not borrowed or derived from someone else's success. Mine. The elevator. Doors opened directly into my new loft, and I gasped involuntarily. The afternoon sun poured through the wall of windows, bathing the space in golden light. The few pieces of furniture I had selected, a deep blue velvet sofa, a massive reclaimed wood dining table perfect for spreading out work, bookshelves waiting to be filled, looked exactly right in the space. I walked to the windows, gazing out at the city below. Somewhere down there, my parents were driving away, their understanding of their daughter fundamentally altered. Somewhere across town, Daniel was probably settling into the empty mansion, his understanding of his ex-wife about to be shattered. And here I stood, at the intersection of what had been and what could be, holding all the power I had quietly, strategically accumulated while they underestimated me. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, my reflection overlaid on the cityscape beyond. Hello, Olivia Wesley, I whispered to myself. It's time to begin, Nee. No waking to the echoing emptiness of rooms designed to impress rather than comfort. Just me, a simple bed with crisp white sheets, and the gentle hum of the city below. Morning arrived with shafts of sunlight streaming through windows I hadn't yet dressed with curtains. I made coffee in the small kitchen, just a French press and beans from Cypress Coffee, and carried it to the dining table where I'd set up my laptop the night before. Today would be my first day as the controlling shareholder of StepLogic, and I intended to make it count. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Lawyer says there's some confusion about the company's shares. Call me. I set the phone down without replying. Let him wonder. Let him worry. For 8 years, I had been the one walking on eggshells, carefully managing his ego, his temper, his insecurities disguised as confidence. No more. Instead, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to StepLogic's board of directors, requesting an emergency meeting that afternoon. I kept the language professional, matter of fact. I attached the documentation proving my controlling interest but offered no explanation beyond discussing the company's strategic direction following recent changes. Let them speculate too. By 9, I had showered and dressed with care, charcoal gray trousers, a crisp white blouse, a structured blazer in deep burgundy. Professional but distinctive. Nothing like the bland designer outfits Daniel had preferred. I wore to company functions, chosen to ensure I faded into the background while he commanded attention. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. Then again, my mother. I silenced it and slipped it into my bag. They could wait. Today belonged to me. StepLogic's offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown tower, all glass and steel and calculated intimidation. I had helped design the space when we'd moved from our original startup incubator, arguing for open workstations and collaborative areas that Daniel had later cordoned off into executive suites and hierarchical departments. The receptionists' eyes widened when I walked in. Mrs. Mitchell. We weren't expecting you today. Ms. Wesley, I corrected gently. And I know. I have a meeting with the board at 2. Is conference room A available until then? I'd like to prepare. Her fingers flew over her keyboard. Of course, Ms. Wesley. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Water would be lovely, thank you. I smiled, realizing she had probably never heard me give a direct request before. In recent years, I had become increasingly peripheral to daily operations, showing up only when Daniel needed my technical expertise to impress investors or solve problems his new hires couldn't handle. News of my arrival spread quickly. As I settled into the conference room, I saw curious glances through the glass walls, heard the muted buzz of speculation. My former assistant, Priya, knocked tentatively on the door. Olivia, she said, using my first name for perhaps the first time. Is it true? Are you and Daniel divorced as of yesterday? I confirmed, gesturing for her to come in. But that's not why I'm here. Priya had been with me since the beginning, a brilliant computer science graduate I'd hired when StepLogic was just 5 people working out of a converted warehouse. Daniel had reassigned her to administrative duties 2 years ago, claiming I didn't need dedicated technical support anymore. Another move to isolate me. I've missed you around here, she said, closing the door behind her. Things have changed. Tell me, I said, pushing aside a stack of papers to give her my full attention. For the next hour, Priya filled me in on what I already suspected but needed confirmed. The privacy protocol I'd been developing, the one Daniel had tried to patent in his own name? He'd gutted it, keeping just enough to claim compliance while building in backdoors that allowed for aggressive data harvesting. The diverse engineering team I'd built? Gradually replaced with fraternity brothers of the new CTO, a Stanford dropout who believed move fast and break things was still an acceptable philosophy in 2025. The culture is toxic, Priya concluded. People are afraid to speak up, to question decisions. It's not what we built, Olivia. No, I agreed, it's not. But that changes today. By the time the board meeting was scheduled to begin, I had spoken to 8 key employees, original team members who had been sidelined or silenced as Daniel's vision overtook mine. Each conversation strengthened my resolve, clarified my purpose. The boardroom filled gradually. 6 men and 1 woman, the token female venture capitalist whose presence allowed them to claim diversity. Daniel arrived last, his face thunderous. His normally perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled. He had the look of someone whose world was shifting beneath his feet. What is this, Olivia? He demanded, foregoing any greeting. Some kind of negotiating tactic? Because if you think, please take your seat, Daniel, I said calmly. I've called this meeting to discuss StepLogic's future, and I'd prefer to address everyone at once. The lead investor, a silver-haired man named James Harrington who had always treated me with polite condescension, cleared his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, Ms. Wesley, I corrected for the second time that day. Ms. Wesley, he amended, while we understand you're going through a difficult personal time, company governance isn't the appropriate venue for domestic disputes. I smiled, opening the folder in front of me. This isn't about my divorce, Mr. Harrington. It's about corporate governance. I distributed copies of the documents I had shown my parents the day before. As you can see, I hold 49% of StepLogic's common shares and 57% of voting rights. The company bylaws, which I drafted when we incorporated, specify that major strategic decisions require approval by a majority of voting shares, not just board seats. The room fell silent as they reviewed the paperwork. Daniel's face flushed. Dark red, a vein pulsing at his temple, a warning sign I had learned to fear during our marriage. Now, I simply watched him, unmoved. This can't be right, he finally sputtered. We're co-founders. Equal partners. That was the public narrative, I agreed. But the legal reality is documented here. I designed the original algorithm. I built the backend that still powers every aspect of our platform. I secured the patents in my name. I met his gaze steadily. You were too busy being the face of StepLogic to read the fine print, Daniel. That's on you. The female board member, Jessica Chen from Ascendant Ventures, was the first to recover. These documents appear to be in order, she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. What are you proposing, Ms. Wesley? I laid out my vision clearly and concisely. StepLogic would return to its original mission of creating technology that respected users while solving real problems. We would re-implement the privacy protocols I had designed, without compromise. We would restructure the executive team to reflect actual contributions rather than Daniel's personal relationships. And we would initiate a company-wide culture assessment, starting at the top. This is ridiculous, Daniel interrupted. You can't just walk in here and, I can, I said quietly. And I am. The company will fail without me, he insisted. I'm the visionary, the one investors trust, the one partners want to work with. I nodded thoughtfully. You've certainly been the public face of StepLogic. That's one reason I'm not proposing to remove you entirely. I glanced around the table. Daniel has valuable relationships and considerable charisma. Those are assets to the company. What I'm proposing is a realignment, Daniel as Chief Marketing Officer, focusing on what he does best, while I resume active leadership of product development and technical strategy. Several board members nodded. They were businesspeople. Pragmatists. If I had the legal authority I claimed, and I did, they would adapt rather than fight. Daniel, however, was not so practical. This is revenge, he hissed. Because I wanted to start a family and you were too obsessed with your career to consider it. The cheap shot hung in the air, personal and painful. For a moment, I was transported. Back to countless arguments in our kitchen, Daniel wielding my supposed selfishness like a weapon whenever I challenged his decisions. The familiar shame rose within me, then dissipated as quickly as it had come. This is business, I replied. Evenly. And if we're discussing obsessions, your fixation on growth at all costs has compromised our original mission, alienated our best talent, and exposed us to significant regulatory risk. I turned to the board. Which brings me to my final point. The current privacy practices implemented under Daniel's direction violate 3 provisions of the Data Protection Act of 2023. We're vulnerable to both regulatory action and class action lawsuits. That got their attention. Nothing motivates investors like legal exposure. How bad? Harrington asked, his expression grave. Fixable, I assured him. But only with immediate and substantial changes to our data practices. Changes I've been advocating for over a year. The meeting continued for another hour, with questions about implementation, market perception, and transition planning. Daniel alternated between sullen silence and desperate attempts to reassert control, but the momentum had shifted decisively. By the end, the board had unanimously approved my proposed reorganization, with the stipulation that Daniel and I would present a united front to employees, partners, and the public. We need stability, Harrington emphasized. No hint of internal conflict. I agreed readily. My goal wasn't to humiliate Daniel but to rescue the company we had built from his worst impulses. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, Daniel remained seated, staring at the table. I gathered my papers unhurriedly, waiting. You planned this all along, he finally said, his voice hollow. Even before you filed for divorce. No, I corrected him. I protected myself from the beginning. There's a difference. He looked up then, and for a moment, I glimpsed something beneath the anger, confusion, perhaps even hurt. I thought we were a team, Liv. Everything I did was for us, for our future. You thought I was an asset, I replied softly. Something you acquired along with the intellectual property. But I was always more than that, Daniel. You just couldn't see it. I left him there, alone with the ruins of his inflated self-perception. As I walked through the office, I caught Priya's eye and nodded slightly. She smiled in return, small, hopeful, conspiratorial. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone was buzzing continuously. News traveled fast in tech circles. I ignored the notifications and stepped outside, taking a deep breath of crisp autumn air. Freedom tasted like possibility, like potential unleashed. I walked the 8 blocks to Cypress Coffee, my mind racing with plans, priorities, the shape of things to come. The cafe was quieter than usual, the afternoon lull between lunch and closing. Sophia looked up as the bell above the door announced my arrival. Well, she asked, already reaching for my usual mug. It's done, I said, settling at my corner table. Phase 1, at least. She brought over my coffee and a blueberry scone. Then sat across from me. Tell me everything. And I did, the words tumbling out faster than I could organize them, the board meeting, Daniel's reaction, the challenges that lay ahead. Sophia listened intently, asking occasional questions but mostly providing the space I needed to process the whirlwind of the day. You know it won't be easy, she observed when I finally paused for breath. Companies are like ocean liners, they don't turn quickly. I know, I acknowledged. Daniel has spent years building a culture in his image. It won't change overnight. Just because the org chart does. And personally, she probed gently. How are you feeling about all this? I considered the question, stirring my coffee absently. Lighter, I decided. Like I've set down a burden I didn't realize I was carrying. For years, I've been living a life that was partly mine, partly what Daniel needed it to be, partly what my parents expected. Today feels like reclamation. Sophia nodded understandingly. What about your parents? Have they called? Constantly, I confirmed, glancing at my still buzzing phone. Along with Daniel, 3 tech journalists, and apparently the host of Disruption Decoded podcast. Are you going to talk to any of them? Eventually, I said. But not today. Today is just for me. For thinking. Planning. Starting with? She prompted. I pulled out a notebook, paper, not digital, another small rebellion against the always connected culture Daniel had fostered at StepLogic. First, the privacy protocol. It needs to be implemented properly, immediately. Then restructuring the engineering department, bringing back diverse voices, challenging perspectives. And personally? Sophia pressed. Not just professionally? I hesitated. For so long, I had defined myself through work, through achievement, through solving problems and building systems. The idea of prioritizing personal growth felt almost self-indulgent. I don't know, I admitted. I've been Daniel's wife, Charles and Victoria's daughter, StepLogic's CTO. I'm not sure who Olivia Wesley is yet, on her own terms. That, Sophia said with a gentle smile, sounds like the most important project of all. We were interrupted by the cafe door opening, the bell jingling cheerfully. I glanced up and froze. My mother stood in the entrance, impeccably dressed as always but somehow smaller than I remembered, more hesitant. Olivia, she said, taking a tentative step forward. Your father and I have been trying to reach you. Sophia squeezed my hand. Under the table, then stood. I'll give you two some privacy, she murmured, returning to the counter. My mother approached slowly, as if afraid I might flee. May I, she asked, gesturing to the chair Sophia had vacated. I nodded, my guard rising instinctively. Victoria Wesley did not make social calls to coffee shops in transitional neighborhoods. She wanted something. She sat, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. Your father is meeting with his attorney, she began. He thinks you should sell your shares while their value is high. Before complications arise. Of course. They weren't concerned about me, they were concerned about potential financial fallout. Some things never changed. There won't be complications, I said. Evenly. I'm taking control of the company, not destroying it. But darling, do you really think you can run StepLogic without Daniel? The investors, the partners, they know him, trust him. The familiar doubting tone, the subtle undermining wrapped in concern. How had I not recognized it sooner for what it was? Actually, Mother, I just came from a board meeting where they unanimously approved my reorganization plan. Daniel stays on as CMO. I take over as CEO. She blinked rapidly, recalibrating. Well, that's unexpected. But still, wouldn't it be simpler to sell? You could live comfortably, take some time to recover from the divorce, maybe meet someone new. I don't need to recover, I said, more sharply than I intended. And I don't need to meet someone new. What I need is to build something meaningful, on my terms. I just don't understand why you're making things so difficult, she sighed. First the divorce, now this corporate, whatever this is. It's not like you, Olivia. I stared at her, struck by the profound irony of her statement. That's just it, Mother. You don't know what's like me. You never have. You've only known the version of me that tried to please you and Dad, that tried to fit into the life you prescribed. Her perfectly lined lips thinned. We only wanted what was best for you. No, I said gently. You wanted what was best for your vision of me. There's a difference. A silence fell between us, heavy with decades of miscommunication and missed connections. My mother fidgeted with her wedding ring, a nervous habit I had rarely seen. Your father will be furious, she finally said. He had meetings scheduled with potential buyers for your shares. The revelation should have angered me, but instead, I felt a strange sense of calm. He can be furious if he wants. I'm not obligated to make life choices based on his temper or his financial schemes. He was trying to help, she insisted, but with less conviction than before. Was he? I asked, genuinely curious now. Or was he trying to maintain control? To keep me dependent on his guidance, his approval? She didn't answer directly, her gaze drifting to the window. We always thought you were the fragile one, she said softly. Nathan was so outgoing, so confident. You were quieter, more serious. We worried. Nathan, my older brother, the golden child who had followed our father into finance without a single deviation from the Wesley family plan. We hadn't spoken in years, not since he had taken Daniel's side in an argument about step logics. Direction, dismissing my concerns as emotional and overcautious. I wasn't fragile, I said. I was thoughtful. There's a difference there too. My mother nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. Perhaps we've underestimated you. It was as close to an admission as I was likely to get. Not an apology, not a recognition of harm done, but a small acknowledgement of misjudgment. I would take it. Perhaps, I agreed. But that's in the past. I'm focused on the future now. She studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. You look different, she observed. Not just the clothes or the hair. Something else. I feel different, I admitted. Stronger. Clearer. She nodded again, then reached into her handbag and extracted a small velvet box. I brought this for you. It was your grandmother's. She placed it on the table between us. I opened it cautiously. To find a slender platinum bracelet set with small sapphires. I remembered it from childhood. My father's mother, a formidable woman who had built a successful interior design business in an era when women were expected to be homemakers, had worn it every day. She wanted you to have it, my mother continued. She said it should go to the Wesley woman who forges her own path. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. Perhaps I do now. I touched the bracelet gently, remembering the grandmother, who had died when I was 15. She had been the one family member who had encouraged my interest in computers, who had given me my first programming book, who had told me there was more than one way to live a successful life. Thank you, I said softly. This means a lot to me. My mother stood, adjusting her perfectly tailored jacket. I should go. Your father will be waiting. She hesitated, then added, will you keep in touch? Let us know how things progress? I will, I promised. When there's something to share. She nodded once more, then turned to leave. At the door, she paused. Olivia? For what it's worth, I think your grandmother would have been proud. Then she was gone, the bell jingling in her wake. I remained at the table, the velvet box open before me, the bracelet catching the afternoon light. A legacy, not of conformity but of independence. A reminder of where I come from, the parts worth keeping, anyway. And where are you going? She asked, refilling my coffee cup. I looked out the window at the city stretching beyond, at the life I was reclaiming one decision at a time. Forward, I said simply. Only forward now. The next morning, I arrived at StepLogic headquarters just after 7. The building was quiet, the main workspace still dark, but light spilled from under the door of Daniel's corner office. He had always been an early riser, driven by a restlessness I once mistook for passion rather than the insecurity I now recognized it to be. I paused outside his door, steeling myself for the confrontation that was inevitable. The board had been clear, we needed to present a united front. That meant finding a way to work with Daniel, not around him. I knocked once, then entered without waiting for a response. Daniel looked up from his laptop, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he might not have gone home at all. Olivia, he said flatly. Come to survey your kingdom? I ignored the bait, setting my bag on a chair and taking in the office I had helped design 3 years earlier. The awards and magazine covers that had once dominated the space, Daniel's face smiling confidently from Forbes, Fortune, Fast Company, had been taken down. The shelves looked bare without them. We need to talk about the announcement, I said, keeping my voice neutral. HR is drafting a company-wide email, but we should address the executive team in person. He laughed humorlessly. And what exactly? Should I tell them? That my wife outsmarted me? That I'm being demoted in my own company? Ex-wife, I corrected mildly. And you're not being demoted, Daniel. You're being repositioned to focus on what you do best, being the face of StepLogic, managing our public image, building relationships. While you take control of everything that matters. I sat across from him, maintaining eye contact. The technical direction of this company has always been what matters most to me. You know that. Or you should. He looked away first, his jaw tight. You could have told me what you were planning. Given me a chance to adjust, to work with you instead of waking up to find everything changed overnight. Like you gave me a chance when you filed for that patent in your name? I countered. Or when you gutted my privacy protocol. Or reassigned my team without consultation. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Those were business decisions. So is this. A silence fell between us, heavy with the weight of all we had been to each other, partners, spouses, collaborators, and now, reluctant colleagues. I searched his face for traces of the man I had fallen in love with 8 years earlier, the ambitious but idealistic entrepreneur who had talked about changing the world, not just conquering markets. He was still in there, perhaps, buried beneath layers of ego and entitlement that success had fostered. I didn't marry you for your algorithms. You know, he said finally, his voice softer. Whatever you might think now. I know, I acknowledged. And I didn't marry you for your connections or charisma. We were good together once, Daniel. We built something meaningful. And now? Now we find a way to preserve what's worth saving, I said simply. The company, if not the marriage. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. The board wants a united front. Fine. Tell me what you need me to say, and I'll say it. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was pragmatic acceptance. For now, that would have to be enough. Thank you, I said, meaning it. The executive team meets at 9. Let's talk through the messaging before then. For the next hour, we hammered out a communication plan that acknowledged the changes in leadership structure while emphasizing continuity and shared vision. Daniel was professional, if not warm, contributing valuable insights about how different stakeholders might react. I was reminded that beneath the ego that had poisoned our marriage, he was still a skilled strategist when it came to managing perceptions. By the time the executive team filed into the conference room at 9, we had a coherent narrative and clear next steps. Daniel took the lead in announcing the reorganization, framing it as an evolution rather than a revolution. I outlined my priorities for the coming quarter, emphasizing a return to our founding principles of user-centric design and responsible innovation. There were questions, of course. Concerns about market reaction, partner relationships, team structures. We answered them together, the rhythm of our back and forth almost natural despite everything that had happened between us. By the end of the meeting, the initial shock had given way to cautious optimism, or at least, professional acceptance. As the room cleared, Marcus Chen, our chief financial officer and one of the few executives I genuinely respected, lingered. Can I have a word, Olivia? He asked once we were alone. Of course. He closed the door, his expression serious. There's something you should know. Something I've been concerned about for months but didn't know how to address with Daniel. At the helm. A knot formed in my stomach. Go on. It's about Project Lighthouse, he said, naming our newest initiative, a smart home platform Daniel had championed as the company's next major growth vector. The privacy implications are problematic. Beyond what you already identified. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus walked me through what he had discovered, data collection practices that went far beyond what our user agreements disclosed. Partnerships with third-party advertisers that blurred ethical lines, potential regulatory violations that made our existing issues look minor by comparison. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I asked when he finished. He looked uncomfortable. Daniel made it clear that anyone who raised concerns was not a team player. After what happened to your original privacy team. He didn't need to finish. I knew exactly what he meant. My most vocal privacy advocates had been systematically sidelined or pushed out over the past year, something I had protested but failed to prevent as my own influence waned. Thank you for telling me now, I said, making notes as we spoke. This becomes our top priority. We need to pause Lighthouse deployment immediately, audit the entire codebase, and revise our data practices before we move forward. Marcus nodded, visible relief on his face. I'll get you everything I have. And Olivia? It's good to have you back. Really back. After he left, I sat alone in the conference room, absorbing the implications of what I'd learned. The situation was worse than I had thought, not just an ethical drift but potentially a legal minefield. Fixing it would require more than reorganization, it would demand a fundamental reassessment of where StepLogic was heading and why. My phone buzzed with a text from my father, "We need to talk. Dinner tonight?" I hesitated, then replied, "Can't. Tonight. Working late. We'll call tomorrow." It wasn't entirely an excuse. The next few days would be crucial for establishing my leadership and addressing the Lighthouse issues before they became public. Family dynamics would have to wait. I spent the rest of the morning in meetings with key team members, assessing the current state of our projects and rebuilding relationships that had frayed during Daniel's ascendancy. By lunchtime, I was both energized and exhausted, the emotional weight of so many transitions beginning to take its toll. Instead of eating in the sleek company cafeteria where I would inevitably be the focus of curious stares, I slipped out of the building and walked the few blocks to a small park I had always loved. I bought a sandwich from a food truck and found an empty bench in a quiet corner, grateful for a moment of solitude. "Mind if I join you?" I looked up to find Priya standing before me, holding her own lunch container. I gestured to the empty space beside me, genuinely pleased to see her. "How's the morning been on the floor?" I asked as she sat. "Lots of speculation, I imagine." "Endless," she confirmed with a small smile. "But mostly positive. People who've been here since the beginning are hopeful." "And the newer hires? The ones who only know Daniel's version of StepLogic?" She considered this as she opened her lunch. "Cautious. Waiting to see what changes. But that's normal." She glanced at me sideways. "The real question is how you're holding up. This can't be easy, personally or professionally." The simple acknowledgement of the complexity of my position, something no one else had offered, was unexpectedly touching. For a moment, I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes and blinked rapidly to dispel them. "It's a lot," I admitted. "The divorce, the company changes, my parents. Sometimes I wonder if I've taken on too much at once." Priya nodded understandingly. "You know what my grandmother always says? When you're going through a storm, keep moving. It's standing still that gets you swept away." The wisdom in that simple statement resonated deeply. I had been moving forward, decisively and purposefully, for months now, ever since the moment I discovered Daniel's attempt to patent my work. That momentum had carried me through difficult decisions, painful confrontations, moments of doubt. If I stopped now, the weight of it all might indeed overwhelm me. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman," I said. "The wisest," Priya agreed. "She came to America with nothing but a suitcase and a scholarship. Built a whole life here, raised 3 children on her own after my grandfather died. Whenever I face something difficult, I think about what she would do." "And what would she do in my situation?" I asked, curious. Priya smiled. "She'd say take it one problem at a time, but never lose sight of why you're solving them in the first place." She paused. "Why are you doing this, Olivia? Really? Is it about proving something to Daniel? To your parents? To yourself?" The question caught me off guard with its directness. I stared out at the park, watching a group of children chase each other across the grass, their laughter carrying on the autumn breeze. When I started coding, I was 15, I said slowly. It was the first thing I ever did that felt completely mine. Not chosen to please my parents or to fit some predetermined path. Just mine. Pure creation. I turned to look at Priya. Step Logic was supposed to be an extension of that feeling. Building something meaningful, something that helped people while respecting their autonomy. Somewhere along the way, that vision got lost. I'm doing this to reclaim it. She nodded, satisfaction in her expression. That's what people need to hear. Not corporate speak about strategic realignment or market positioning. That authentic purpose. That's what will bring them along with you. She was right, I realized. In crafting messages with Daniel that morning, we had focused on continuity and stability, important for investors and partners, certainly, but not inspiring for the people who would actually implement the changes we envisioned. Thank you, I said with genuine gratitude. For the perspective. And for sticking around through all the changes. Some things are worth fighting for, she replied simply. We finished our lunch in companionable silence, the autumn sun warm on our faces despite the crisp air. As we walked back to the office together, I felt a renewed sense of clarity and purpose. This wasn't just about corporate control or personal vindication. It was about building something authentic and worthwhile. The afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. I authorized an immediate halt to the Lighthouse project pending review, initiated a comprehensive audit of our data practices, and began reconstructing the privacy team that had been dismantled. Each decision felt right, aligned with both strategic necessity and core values. By 7, the office had emptied, but lights still burned in several corners, dedicated engineers working late, cleaning staff beginning their rounds. I gathered my things, ready to head home to my loft, when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Olivia Wesley, I answered, using my reclaimed name with growing confidence. Ms. Wesley, this is Amanda Reeves from TechWire. The voice was professional, practiced. We're running a story tomorrow on the leadership changes at StepLogic. I was hoping to get your comment on rumors that the reorganization is related to potential regulatory issues with your Lighthouse platform. My heart sank. Someone had leaked Marcus's concerns before we had a chance to address them properly. This was exactly the kind of public scrutiny we had hoped to avoid during the transition. Ms. Reeves, I said carefully, StepLogic is undergoing a planned leadership evolution that allows our founders to focus on their areas of greatest strength. As with any technology company, we regularly review all our products to ensure they meet the highest standards of privacy and security. I'd be happy to schedule a more detailed conversation later this week. Sources inside the company suggest that you've halted development on Lighthouse due to serious privacy violations, she pressed. Can you confirm or deny that? I can confirm that we are conducting a routine review of all active projects as part of our commitment to responsible innovation, I replied, sticking to non-specific language while my mind raced. That's our standard practice and reflects StepLogic's ongoing dedication to user trust. She asked several more questions, which I deflected with similar diplomatic responses. After she hung up, I immediately called Marcus, then our head of communications, alerting them to the potential story. We would need to prepare a more comprehensive statement, brief the board, and develop a crisis management plan before morning. So much for going home early. It was nearly midnight when I finally left the building, exhaustion settling into my bones. The crisis wasn't averted, TechWire would run something, though we had managed to provide enough context to soften the most damaging angles, but at least we were prepared. The Lighthouse review would continue, transparently now that the issues were becoming public. In some ways, the leak might even help accelerate the changes I wanted to make, providing external pressure that would overcome internal resistance. The night air was cold as I walked to my car, stars visible despite the city lights. I paused for a moment, looking up at the vastness above, feeling suddenly small yet strangely empowered. One day at a time, one problem at a time. That was how you rebuilt a company, a life, a sense of self. My loft was dark when I arrived, the emptiness no longer lonely but peaceful. I kicked off my shoes, heated water for tea, and curled up on the window seat overlooking the city. Lights twinkled below, each one representing lives being lived, stories unfolding, choices being made. Somewhere out there, Daniel was processing his new reality. My parents were likely discussing my decisions, trying to fit them into their understanding of who their daughter was. And here I sat, separate yet connected, forging my own path one deliberate step at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Heard about the TechWire story. You okay? News traveled fast in tech circles. Handling it, I replied. Tomorrow will be interesting. Come by for coffee if you need a sanctuary, she texted back. Proud of you. 3 simple words that meant more than she could know. Proud of you. When was the last time anyone had expressed pride in my choices rather than disappointment that I wasn't following their script? I couldn't remember. I slept deeply that night, dreamlessly, the kind of rest that comes after facing challenges directly rather than avoiding them. Morning arrived with pale sunlight and a determination that felt almost foreign in its clarity. Whatever TechWire published, whatever reaction awaited at the office, I would face it head-on. I dressed with care, a structured dress in deep blue, my grandmother's bracelet on my wrist, low heels that were practical without sacrificing presence. Professional, confident, authentic. The woman in the mirror looked back at me with steady eyes, no trace of the uncertainty that had shadowed me for too long. My phone buzzed as I was pouring coffee. Daniel. Have you seen it? Not yet, I texted back. On my way in. It's actually not bad, he replied, surprising me. Balanced. They reached out to me too. I scrolled to the TechWire site, finding the article prominently featured, StepLogic reshuffles leadership amid privacy concerns, co-founders chart new course. The piece was indeed more nuanced than I had feared. It covered the leadership changes accurately, noted the Lighthouse Review without sensationalism, and included quotes from both Daniel and me that emphasized our ongoing partnership despite personal changes. There was even a sidebar highlighting my technical background and early contributions to the company, context often omitted from StepLogic coverage that had centered Daniel almost exclusively. Looks like your PR skills are still sharp, I texted Daniel, a small olive branch. Some things don't change, he replied. See you at the office. When I arrived, the atmosphere was buzzing but not panicked. The communications team had distributed our prepared statement, emphasizing transparency and our commitment to addressing any issues found in the Lighthouse Review. Daniel was visible on the main floor, moving between groups, steady and reassuring. Whatever his private feelings, he was keeping his word about presenting a united front. Marcus met me at my office door, tablet in hand. Board's been briefed. They're concerned but supportive of the review process. And I've got the initial findings from the technical audit. We spent the next hour going through the details, the scope of the privacy issues, potential remediation steps, timeline for implementation. The problems were significant but fixable with focused effort and a clear commitment to our original values. It's going to mean pushing back the Lighthouse launch by at least a quarter, Marcus concluded. And the changes will impact revenue projections for next year. But we'll make the product stronger and more sustainable long-term, I countered. And significantly reduce our regulatory risk. He nodded agreement. The challenge will be bringing everyone along, investors, partners, the sales team that's already been promising features we may need to modify. That's where Daniel comes in, I said, a plan forming as we spoke. His strength has always been storytelling, helping people see the vision. If we can align on the vision itself, then he can sell it better than anyone, Marcus finished. But are you sure he's on board? Really on board? It was a fair question. Daniel had agreed to the public narrative, but that didn't mean he had genuinely accepted the new direction or my leadership. Trust between us had been broken long before the divorce was finalized. Let's find out, I said, picking up my phone. I texted Daniel, need to discuss Lighthouse strategy. Lunch? His reply came quickly, Plaza Cafe, 12:30? The Plaza Cafe was where we had celebrated StepLogic's first major funding round, where we had drafted our original mission statement on a napkin, where we had once shared dreams and ambitions before success and ego complicated everything. His choice of location wasn't accidental. See you there, I replied. The morning passed in a series of meetings with team leads, each conversation reinforcing what I already knew. People were hungry for authentic leadership, for work that aligned with values they could believe in. The early employees remembered why they had joined StepLogic in the first place. The newer ones were eager to be part of something meaningful rather than just profitable. The culture hadn't been completely lost during Daniel's ascendancy, just suppressed beneath layers of growth at all costs pressure. At 12:25, I walked the 3 blocks to Plaza Cafe, a small bistro tucked between office buildings that had somehow maintained its character despite the neighborhood's rapid development. Daniel was already there, seated at our table by the window, 2 glasses of sparkling water waiting. "Thanks for suggesting this," he said as I sat across from him. "It's been a morning." "For everyone," I agreed. "But we're managing the situation better than I expected." He nodded, a hint of the old Daniel, the partner I had once trusted implicitly, in his thoughtful expression. "The TechWire piece could have been much worse. And the team is rallying, especially the old guard." "That's what I want to talk about," I said, getting straight to the point. "Lighthouse has serious issues, Daniel. More than just the privacy concerns that leaked. We need to fundamentally rethink the approach, which means delays, changes to what sales has been promising, potential partner disappointments." I watched his face carefully as I spoke, looking for the defensive reaction I had come to expect whenever his initiatives were questioned. Instead, I saw something unexpected: resignation, perhaps even relief. "I know," he said quietly. "I've known for months that we were pushing too hard, cutting too many corners. But the board, the investors, the market expectations, it felt like a runaway train I couldn't stop." His admission stunned me. "Why didn't you say something? We could have addressed this together." He met my gaze directly. "Because I didn't want to admit you were right. About the privacy protocols, about the data practices, about the direction we were taking. My pride got in the way of doing what was right for the company. For the users." He paused, adding softly, "For us." The simple honesty of his statement caught me off guard. This was the Daniel I had fallen in love with, capable of self-reflection, of admitting mistakes, of putting purpose above ego. Where had this man been for the past 2 years? "So what now?" I asked. "Now," he said, leaning forward slightly, "we do what we should have done all along. We build something we're proud of, something that reflects the values we started with. You lead the technical direction, that was always your strength. I'll handle the storytelling, the relationships, the public narrative. And you're really okay with that? With me as CEO?" A flicker of something, regret, perhaps, crossed his face. "I'd be lying if I said my ego is completely on board. But the company is bigger than my ego. It always should have been." For the first time since I had walked out of the lawyer's office clutching that manila envelope, I felt a genuine connection with the man I had once built dreams alongside. Not the renewal of romantic feelings, those were gone, transformed by too many betrayals and disappointments, but a recognition of the partnership that had created something valuable before personal ambitions interfered. "I think," I said carefully, "that Lighthouse could still be revolutionary. Not as a data harvesting tool disguised as convenience, but as a genuinely user-centered platform that prioritizes privacy while delivering real value." "The original vision," he acknowledged. "Before we got distracted by what competitors were doing, what investors were demanding." "It will take longer," I warned. "Cost more. Satisfy fewer short-term metrics. But build something sustainable," he countered. "Something we can stand behind ethically and strategically." We spent the next hour outlining a new approach to Lighthouse, keeping the core functionality but rebuilding the privacy architecture from the ground up, implementing the protocols I had originally designed, creating transparency mechanisms that would set new standards for the industry. It wasn't just damage control, it was a genuine recommitment to the principles that had brought us together in the first place. As we walked back to the office side by side, autumn leaves swirling around our feet, I felt something shift between us, not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but the first tentative steps toward a new kind of partnership. Not husband and wife. Not even friends, but collaborators united by a shared vision of what technology could and should be. "We can do this," Daniel said as we reached the StepLogic building, almost to himself. "We can make this right." I looked up at the company logo gleaming against the glass facade, then at the man beside me, flawed, humbled, but perhaps finally ready to build something authentic. "Yes," I agreed. "I think we can." 6 months passed in a blur of purpose-driven work, challenging decisions, and gradual transformation. The Lighthouse project had been completely rebuilt from the ground up with privacy as its foundation rather than an afterthought. Our company culture had slowly shifted back toward innovation, balanced with responsibility. The stock had initially dipped when we announced the delayed launch, but had recovered as industry analysts recognized that we were ahead of inevitable regulatory changes rather than scrambling to catch up. Today marked the official relaunch of StepLogic's public image, new website, new messaging, new commitment to users. I stood at the back of our largest conference room, watching as Daniel presented the vision to assembled journalists, industry analysts, and influencers. He was in his element, commanding the room with the charisma that had always been his greatest strength. At StepLogic, we believe technology should enhance human autonomy, not diminish it, he was saying, the words we had crafted together flowing naturally. That's why our new Lighthouse platform is built on a foundation of radical transparency and user control. Your home, your data, your choices, always. I felt a presence beside me and turned to find Marcus, our CFO, offering a discreet thumbs up. Stock's up 3 points since he started talking, he murmured. The market likes what they're hearing. It's not just talk this time, I replied quietly. The product actually delivers on the promise. Daniel was now demonstrating the Lighthouse Privacy Dashboard, the feature I had insisted on despite pushback from the sales team who worried it would limit monetization opportunities. Users could see exactly what data was being collected, how it was being used, and could adjust settings with unprecedented granularity. More importantly, the system was designed to function effectively even with minimal data sharing, appending the industry assumption that comprehensive surveillance was necessary for smart features. This wasn't the easy path, Daniel acknowledged. To the audience, his tone more authentic than the polished corporate speak he had once favored. Rebuilding from first principles meant delays, hard conversations with partners, revised projections. But it was the right path. The only path consistent with who we are and what we stand for. His eyes found mine across the room, a moment of silent acknowledgement passing between us. We had fought over nearly every aspect of the redesign, not from opposing values this time, but from different perspectives on implementation. The healthy tension had produced something better than either of us could have created alone. As the presentation concluded and attendees moved to the demo station set up around the periphery, I slipped out of the room. My presence wasn't necessary. For this part, the technical teams were well prepared to showcase the features they had built with such care and pride. Besides, I had another meeting to prepare for, one I had been both anticipating and dreading for weeks. My parents were coming to StepLogic headquarters for the first time. Not for a social visit, but because my father had requested a formal meeting in his capacity as an investor looking to diversify his portfolio. After our confrontation 6 months ago, we had maintained minimal contact, occasional text messages, brief calls on birthdays and holidays. This would be our first substantive interaction since I had taken control of the company and my life. I straightened my office, not out of anxiety about their judgment but as a simple courtesy. The space reflected my leadership style, organized but not rigid, professional but personal. Technical books shared shelf space with literature and philosophy. Diplomas and patents hung alongside artwork from local creators. My grandmother's bracelet rested on a small dish beside my keyboard, a daily reminder of the legacy of independent Wesley women. A soft knock at the door announced Priya, now my chief of staff. "They're here," she said. "Your father seems tense." I smiled reassuringly. "That's his natural state. It's fine." "Want me to stay?" she offered. I could take notes, provide interruptions if needed. Her protectiveness touched me. Over the past months, Priya had become more than an employee, a trusted ally, perhaps even a friend. She had witnessed firsthand how much work it had taken to reshape StepLogic, both technically and culturally. "I appreciate the offer, but I can handle Charles and Victoria Wesley," I said with more confidence than I had ever felt in their presence. "Send them in, please." They entered with the carefully calibrated poise that had been their hallmark throughout my childhood, my father in a perfectly tailored suit that projected old money authority, my mother an understated designer wear that signaled refinement without ostentation. But something was different. My father seemed smaller somehow, less commanding. My mother's smile, usually practiced and performative, held a hint of genuine warmth. "Olivia," my father said, extending his hand formally. "Thank you for making time." "Dad," I replied, accepting the handshake but then stepping forward to offer a brief hug instead. "Mom. Welcome to StepLogic." I gestured to the sitting area in the corner of my office, comfortable chairs arranged around a low table rather than the imposing desk setup my father favored in his own workspace. They sat, taking in the room with poorly concealed curiosity. We saw some of the presentation on our way in, my mother offered. Daniel seems different. We all are, I acknowledged, taking a seat across from them. It's been a transformative few months. My father cleared his throat, transitioning to business mode, his comfort zone. The quarterly reports have been impressive, particularly given the lighthouse delays and restructuring costs. Thank you, I said simply. We're building for sustainable growth rather than short-term gains. The market is beginning to recognize the value in that approach. Your brother said I should look seriously at increasing my position, he continued, the mention of Nathan surprising me. He thinks you've positioned StepLogic ahead of likely regulatory changes in the industry. Nathan, my golden child brother, who had followed flawlessly in our father's footsteps, was now apparently following my lead. The irony wasn't lost on me. The regulatory landscape is certainly shifting, I agreed. Privacy and data ethics are no longer optional considerations. Companies that adapt proactively will have significant advantages. My father nodded, his expression thoughtful rather than dismissive. I've prepared some questions about your technology roadmap and financial projections, if you don't mind. For the next 30 minutes, we engaged in the most substantive conversation I could remember having with my father. He asked incisive questions about our strategic positioning, market differentiation, and competitive threats. I answered with confidence and candor, neither downplaying challenges nor overselling opportunities. It was the exchange of equals, professional, respectful, genuine. I'm impressed, he said finally, setting aside his notes. Not just with the company's prospects, but with your leadership, Olivia. You've shown remarkable clarity. Coming from Charles Wesley, this constituted effusive praise. I accepted it with a simple nod, neither dismissing the compliment nor seeking more. Your grandmother would be proud, my mother added quietly. She always said you had a vision others couldn't see. The mention of my grandmother, the original independent Wesley woman, created an unexpected lump in my throat. I think about her often, I admitted. Especially when facing difficult decisions. A comfortable silence fell, the kind that had never existed in our family dynamics before. My mother broke it with an uncharacteristically direct question. Are you happy, Olivia? Not just successful, but happy? The question caught me off guard with its sincerity. I considered it carefully, looking past the professional achievements of recent months to the personal growth that had accompanied them. I'm whole, I said finally. Making choices that align with my values, building something meaningful, surrounding myself with people who see me clearly. It's more than happiness. It's purpose. My mother nodded slowly, something like recognition in her eyes. I wanted that for you once, she said softly. Before I started wanting other things instead, status, security, the approval of people who didn't matter. It was perhaps the most honest thing she had ever said to me, an acknowledgement of how her own choices had shaped her expectations for her daughter. Not quite an apology, but a step toward understanding. It's not too late, I offered. To realign with what matters to you. She exchanged a glance with my father, some private communication passing between them. We've been discussing changes, she admitted. Your father is considering retirement. Real retirement, not just joining more boards. We're thinking of selling the Highland Park house, my father added, surprising me further. It's too large for just us. Too performative. The home they had lived in for 30 years, the showcase property that had hosted countless strategic social gatherings and been featured in architectural magazines, this was a significant shift indeed. What would you do instead? I asked. Genuinely curious. We're not sure yet, my mother replied. That's part of what makes it interesting. For so long, we've followed a predetermined path. Maybe it's time to explore alternatives. Your revolution has been thought-provoking, my father admitted with the ghost of a smile. For all of us. Before I could respond, a knock at the door announced Priya's return. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but the tech demo is wrapping up, and several journalists are asking to speak with you specifically. Thank you, I said. I'll be right there. I turned back to my parents. Duty calls. But I'd like to continue this conversation. Perhaps dinner next week? At my place? We'd like that, my mother said, standing. My father nodded agreement. As they prepared to leave, my father hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small envelope. Before I forget, Nathan asked me to give you this. It's an invitation to Jacob's 5th birthday party. Your nephew has been asking about his Aunt Olivia. I accepted the envelope, touched by the gesture. My relationship with Nathan had been strained for years, competitive in childhood and distant in adulthood. That he would reach out now, include me in his son's celebration, suggested he too was reconsidering family dynamics. Tell him I'll be there, I said. After my parents left, I took a moment to center myself before heading to the media scrum. Standing at my office window overlooking the city, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months, not just the professional achievements, but the personal reclamation. I had rebuilt a company according to my values, but more importantly, I had rebuilt myself. Not from scratch, but from first principles, sorting through the experiences and relationships that had shaped me, keeping what served my authentic self and discarding what didn't. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia at Cypress Coffee House. Launch day going? Still on for celebration dinner tonight? So far, so good, I replied. And absolutely yes for dinner. I have stories to tell. I slipped my grandmother's bracelet onto my wrist, drawing strength from its legacy, and headed out to face the journalists. Their questions were predictable: market positioning, competition, the delayed launch, the partnership with Daniel. Post-divorce. I answered with transparency and conviction, neither avoiding difficult topics nor dwelling on the personal drama that some seemed eager to explore. Ms. Wesley, called out a reporter from Tech Quarterly, some analysts have suggested that StepLogic's new privacy-centered approach limits your monetization potential. How do you respond to concerns that you're leaving money on the table? We're challenging the false dichotomy between user respect and business success, I replied. The assumption that exploitation is necessary for profit is not just ethically problematic but strategically short-sighted. Trust is the most valuable currency in the digital economy, and you can't build trust while undermining user autonomy. But your competitors continue to collect and leverage user data much more aggressively. He pressed. Doesn't that put you at a disadvantage? Short term, possibly, I acknowledged. But we're playing a longer game. As awareness grows and regulations evolve, the cost of privacy violations will increase, both in financial penalties and lost trust. We're building a company that won't need to scramble to adapt when that reckoning comes. From the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel nodding approvingly. Despite our personal history, we had found a way to align on core principles, to leverage our complementary strengths, to build something neither of us could have created alone. Not a reconciliation, but a different kind of partnership based on mutual respect rather than romantic attachment. As the media event concluded and the crowd began to disperse, I found myself drawn to the original StepLogic logo displayed in the lobby, a simple, elegant design I had created in that corner table at Cypress Coffee years ago. It represented everything we had initially stood for: clarity, integrity, innovation in service of genuine human needs. We had strayed from that vision, seduced by growth metrics and market validation, but had found our way back through difficult choices and honest reckonings. It still holds up, said a voice beside me. Daniel, his media persona set aside now that the cameras were gone. Some things do, I agreed. When they're built on solid foundations. He nodded, understanding the layers in my response. The team wants to celebrate tonight. They're thinking that new place on Riverside, craft cocktails, farm to table, the full tech company celebration package. I smiled but shook my head. You go. Be the charismatic leader they deserve. I have other plans. Cypress Coffee, he guessed, knowing me still despite everything that had changed between us. Not just with the product. With finding a way forward that honors what we built together without pretending nothing changed. I accepted the handshake, this simple professional gesture somehow more meaningful than the embraces we had once shared. We did. That evening, as the sun set over the city, I sat at my familiar corner table in Cypress Coffee. Sophia had closed the cafe early for a private celebration with the small circle who had supported me through the transformation of the past year: Priya, Marcus, a few other key allies from StepLogic, and surprisingly, my mother, who had asked if she could join after my father returned to their hotel to take a business call. To Olivia, Sophia toasted, raising her glass of champagne, a special exception to the cafe's usual offerings. Who reminded all of us that reclaiming your power isn't about domination, but about alignment, bringing your outer life into harmony with your inner truth. To Olivia, they echoed, glasses clinking in the warm light of the cafe that had witnessed so many chapters of my journey. My mother, sitting slightly apart as if not quite sure of her welcome in this intimate gathering, caught my eye across the table. In her gaze, I saw something I had sought for decades without realizing it, not approval based on achievement or status, but recognition of who I truly was. She raised her glass slightly in a private toast between us, a silent acknowledgement that transcended the complicated history we shared. Later, as conversations flowed around me, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The night air was cool but not cold, stars visible between scattered clouds. 6 months ago, I had stood outside a lawyer's office clutching papers that represented both an ending and a beginning. I had felt raw then, exposed, uncertain despite my careful planning. Now I stood rooted in a sense of self that no external validation could provide or external criticism could diminish. The journey hadn't been easy, rebuilding rarely is. There had been setbacks, doubts, moments when the weight of transformation felt too heavy to bear. But each step had strengthened my resolve, each challenge had clarified my purpose, each small victory had confirmed that authenticity was worth the struggle it demanded. Mind if I join you? I turned to find my mother in the doorway, her usual perfect posture softened somewhat by the evening's warmth and wine. Please, I said, gesturing to the space beside me. She stepped out, wrapping her cashmere cardigan more tightly around her shoulders. Your friends are lovely, she offered. Genuine. They are, I agreed. They've been there through everything. Not just the successes but the difficult parts too. That's rare, she said softly. Real friendship. I sometimes think. She paused, then continued with uncharacteristic openness. I sometimes think I sacrificed that, pursuing the kind of connections that advanced our social position rather than nourished my spirit. The admission surprised me, Victoria Wesley. Acknowledging regrets, questioning the choices that had defined her adult life. Perhaps my own transformation had created space for hers. It's never too late to build authentic relationships, I said. To realign your life with what truly matters to you. She nodded slowly. Your father and I are trying. In our way. It's not easy, changing patterns established over decades. But watching you these past months has been inspiring. Inspiring? I repeated, the word unexpected from a woman who had always seemed to find my choices puzzling at best, disappointing at worst. You had the courage to start over, she said simply. To walk away from what wasn't working and build something true to yourself instead. That takes remarkable strength, Olivia. The validation I had once desperately sought from her now arrived. When I no longer needed it, and was all the more meaningful for that timing. Not because it confirmed my worth, but because it suggested her own growth, her expanding capacity to see beyond the narrow definitions of success that had constrained us both. Thank you, I said, meaning it deeply. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the occasional car pass on the quiet street, each lost in our own thoughts yet somehow more connected than we had been in years. We should go back in, I said finally. They'll be wondering where we are. As we turned toward the cafe door, my mother paused, placing her hand lightly on my arm. I just want you to know, I see you, Olivia. Not the daughter I thought I wanted, but the woman you've become. And I'm proud of that woman. So very proud. The words washed over me like a benediction, healing places I hadn't realized were still tender. Not because I needed her approval to validate my choices, but because there is something profoundly human about being truly seen by those who have known us longest. Inside, laughter and conversation flowed warmly. My people, the family I had chosen, the connections I had built, the community that sustained me through transformation. And now, perhaps, space for healing the family I had been born into as well, not through compromise or surrender but through mutual growth and authentic recognition. I rejoined the gathering, slipping into my seat at the corner table where I had once coded alone for hours, dreaming of building something meaningful. The dreams had changed shape over the years, expanded beyond professional ambition to encompass a broader vision of an authentic life. The path hadn't been straight or simple. There had been detours, backtracking, moments of losing sight of the destination entirely. But here I stood, or rather, here I sat, surrounded by evidence that reclamation was possible. That it was never too late to reassert control over your narrative, to realign your external reality with your internal truth, to build a life that reflected your core values rather than others' expectations. Sophia caught my eye across the table and raised her glass in another small toast. To new beginnings, she mouthed silently. And to the strength to create them, I whispered back, the simple truth that had carried me from that moment outside the lawyer's office to this celebration of purpose reclaimed and power rightfully owned. Not the end of the journey, but a meaningful milestone along it. Not perfect resolution, but purposeful evolution. Not a final destination, but a moment to acknowledge how far I had come, and to embrace the path still unfolding before me, now walked with confidence, clarity, and the unshakable knowledge of my own worth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.